Welcome back to the show, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. If you've noticed, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you might notice a lot of differences. Different background, I'm using a different microphone. If you're also listening, you probably can hear a difference in the quality of the sound. Hopefully it's on par or maybe even better, who knows. But as you can imagine, during these times, my family is quarantined in our home in Ohio. Basically, unless you're going to work or to pick up essential items at the grocery store, we were asked to stay inside. And my family's doing our best to abide by those regulations right now. Now, I do always record these podcasts in my home, and what you are seeing is what is typically behind the camera, the other side of my office. But right now, my podcast table has been changed into my work at home station. My job had everybody bring their computer from work home, and so I set that up on the podcast table. And then also, as far as using a different microphone and everything, I was able to keep all of the microphones connected to the table, all the wires and everything. Didn't have to move any of that around. So I thought I wanted to leave it alone as much as possible, especially because at first we thought this quarantine wasn't going to be too long, but now it has been extended another 30 days. So I may be rearranging some things. That I may change the look around a bit, just experimenting with what I can do during this time before I have my table back. But right now that's where my work computer is. And the reason that I'm not using the typical microphone the microphone I use to typically record, it actually has to go through 3 different devices to record. One that processes the microphone, one that gives it a bit of a boost because it is a very quiet microphone, which is a great thing about it. But to move that all into a new spot, like I said, it's 3 very, they're about a foot long each. They're different devices that they got to be plugged into. They take up a lot of desk space. And then also, you can imagine they need power, and I'm very limited on wall outlets in my office. So right now, just doing the best I can with what I got. And then also, as far as, I only have one camera set up, basically using my lights that are battery operated. If you could imagine, the old setup was just kind of just sit down and press record and go. And I've been using all of my camera equipment and everything I use to make videos for clients. I've been using that for my church. I've been helping my cousin set up in our church's library for him to record his service so he can stream it in lieu of having people come to service. That's how we've been doing it at our church, is streaming. So I've been moving my equipment back and forth. And so right now I'm kind of just trying to keep it easy for myself because I know I'm going to have to be moving it again. And so kind of what you're seeing is just my temporary setup. What I'm doing now is just basically like a temporary, almost travel setup, I suppose. If I was traveling and had to go somewhere else, this is basically probably what I would do. So it'll be interesting to see how it sounds and how it looks. It's something I've actually always wanted to try to do as far as testing out my traveling setup. So finally get a chance to do that and get to do it at home too. How about that? So today the question is, does God know our hearts? And there are supposedly scriptures that contradict each other, saying that God, either he does or he doesn't. So I'm going to go over those scriptures real quick. First off, does God know our hearts? And as far as the scriptures that say he does, are Acts 1:24, and they prayed and said, "Thou Lord, which knowest the hearts of all men." Then another one in Psalms 44:21, he knoweth the secrets of the heart. And then last, Psalms 139, 2-3, thou knowest my downsitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. And then we have 3 scriptures that supposedly give the idea that God does not know our hearts. So he has to test us to learn about exactly what we're going to do. And the first one is in Deuteronomy 8:2. And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or not. Another one in Deuteronomy 13:3, for the Lord your God proveth you, to know whether ye love the Lord your God with all your soul. And then lastly, 2 Chronicles 32:31, God left him, Hezekiah, to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So first off, in Deuteronomy, Moses is telling the Israelite people, part of the reason that they are wandering the desert for 40 years is kind of a test to see how much they really do love God, and for a chance for them to prove themselves, if you will. And then the same thing in 2 Chronicles, God is testing Hezekiah just to see if his heart is really all in it. So the question here is, if in Acts and the 2 scriptures in Psalms where it says he knows our heart, why does he got to put us through those tests? And before I go into my thoughts on this, and I feel like I haven't been saying this quite a bit in the past few episodes, but the explanation I'm going to give to these is probably, again, not going to be good enough for somebody who is like, these are definitely contradicting each other. And if God really is all knowing and he knows your heart, then why does he have to test us? So yeah, my explanation basically is because we have a loving God who gives us chances. And I know that's just not going to be good enough for some people. Some people just can't accept that, they just have this idea, if you have the power, then therefore you use it. And if you remember, if you've been listening to the show anytime, Paul has said a few times on the show, and if you're new to the show, Paul Hensley used to be on the show with me. He used to co-host with me. Also, Matthew Browning, who was a guest on the show last week. And things just got busy. So, but you can actually, if you're watching on YouTube, you probably don't see any of his episodes on YouTube. That's because we never did any video while he was on the show. But if you like to listen to all of our archived episodes where him and Matt are with me, go to wherever you stream podcasts and they're all there. But something Paul said a lot was, God can see in the future, but that doesn't mean he does do it. There's a lot of things that we know that God is capable of and God can do, and he simply doesn't do it. And mainly the reason why is he doesn't tamper with free will. He gave us free will. So for him just to look into our hearts and base the decision on that, well, that's not giving us a chance, and that's not letting us exercise our free will to be able to show ourselves worthy. And that's exactly what God is doing. That's something you do with someone you love. If you have a spouse, or you're dating, or you're courting, or whatever you're right now, or even with your children, or anyone you truly love in your life, a really close friend, you always give them a benefit of the doubt, right? You may think that exactly their response is going to be before you say something. And I constantly do that myself. My wife and I were having this discussion just last night before I recorded this about this, how I didn't feel the need to talk to someone about something because I knew exactly what their response was going to be. And she said, well, that's not very fair. And that's exactly the case here. It wouldn't be very fair of God to not, just to base off his knowledge, even though his knowledge would be 100% correct. But he gives us a chance because he's a loving God and he's a fair God and he's a just God. And part of being just and fair is to give people that chance, to give people a chance to prove themselves worthy, or to give people a chance to prove that their heart is all in it, as they say here, as God is giving them the opportunity to show if the commandments really are in their heart. I would say any believer would agree that God knows our hearts because he knows us well, but he does give us the chance to prove ourselves in the time. He's not just going to strike us off the earth because he knows exactly how we're going to be. This comes down basically to the creation of the world. I've talked to people a lot about this. Why even create man? Why even put humanity into existence? Because he knew exactly how they would be. He had to know the future. And I like what Paul said. Does he use that power of seeing into the future? Maybe he doesn't. But also I think that, you know what, even if he does know the future, he just loves us that much to give us that chance, regardless of what he knows. He just loved the thought of us. He loved the thought of humanity, regardless of all the grief that we're going to put him through. He loved us so much, and loved the idea that he went ahead and created us anyways, regardless of what he knew. That's kind of how I see it. And that's just the case here. Yes, he knows our hearts. Yes, he knew exactly how the Israelite people are and how they act and what they do. And even though constantly in the wilderness, they were giving him grief and they were giving him a hard time. And even sometimes he sent judgment because of that. But even all through those 40 years, he was giving them an opportunity to show themselves that they do truly love him and they do hold his commandments in their heart. Same thing with Hezekiah, giving him an opportunity to prove himself. And I can't think of anyone who wouldn't say that, that's fair. Everyone believes that they should have a chance and the opportunity to prove themselves in any way. Even when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to our court systems, the criminal, even though the evidence is there and there's just no doubt that someone did something, they still have the chance to a trial, a chance to go and tell their part of the story and testify and speak to a jury and speak to a judge. And that's a fair chance, and that's how it should be, and that's exactly how God is, because God's a just God, he's a loving God, and he lets us have our free will. So these aren't contradicting each other. This is just, God not using his power to completely dominate us and to completely make our relationship something that can be closer, and it doesn't have to feel like a dictatorship, if you will, or it doesn't feel like he is completely controlling us, that he is giving us the opportunity and a chance to have a genuine relationship with him. Because if he was just calling all the shots based on how he knew we were doing things, we wouldn't have a very genuine relationship. You can't have a genuine relationship with your spouse if you're always going to base off, it's like, well, I was going to do this for her or him, or I was going to say this, but I know their response. I know how they're going to act. Now, I will say, on the other hand of that, don't do something you absolutely know that's going to make them mad, I would say. There's definitely things I knew that if I did this, my wife would be upset about that. That's common sense. But I'm just saying, like saying things, you're afraid to say something because you know how they're going to react to it. This can come down just to the checkbook. You're afraid to admit a mistake. Because that it will upset them, and they might not respond in a very nice way, and they might make you feel bad about that. But you love them, and you want to give them a chance because they love you too, and that they respect you, and so you go ahead and do things like that. So don't do anything you flat out know that's gonna upset them. I would say don't do that. Don't chance that if you know, and you know that because you've done it in the past. Just stay away from that. But, when it comes to making decisions, definitely involve that with somebody, even a friend or a coworker or whatnot. Maybe they will say yes. Maybe you already know their opinion on it just because you worked with them or you've been with them for so long. You know exactly their response. You know exactly their opinion without even having to talk to them. But you still give them the benefit of the doubt. You still give them a chance. And that's just a fair way to do things. And we have a fair and just God. And we should be very happy about that. And something else this kind of made me think of, not really, it does have to do with this, but it's not really on debunking this contradiction. But I think a lot, and I see a lot, people do things that are against the ways of God. And they say, well, it's fine because he knows my heart. He knows I am a good person. And I think right here, yes, maybe you are a good person. Yes, God can see that you are a good person, and good people do things they shouldn't. And if you're like me, something I do enjoy, I don't know why I enjoy it, I just do. But I watch a lot of documentaries, and I listen to some podcasts that have to do about serial killers and stuff like that. And I know that seems a little weird for someone like me to do, but it's the psyche. I'm interested into the human thought and what makes people do things, and what is so it's not just serial killers interest me. It's anything in that sense, like just human thought, human reactions, what make people do things, what make people go that far. And so one of those things will be serial killers. And something they all do say a lot, when they're in the court, or even just someone who's murdered somebody or done something wrong that they shouldn't have, and now they've gone to jail, and now they're in court, and they'll say, well, I'm a good person. And then, they'll have other people testify, family members and close friends, they're good people. And maybe they are. And I would say that's almost based on what they're in court for. But, and that's something else I've even heard with close people to me. They've had someone they love go to jail for any reason. They got caught doing drugs, they got caught thieving, or just somewhere they weren't supposed to be, what have you, number of reasons why. And they always want to say they're a good person. And yes, they may be, but at the same time, they've done something wrong. And when they had the opportunity to prove themselves that they are going to do the right thing, and they didn't. And so now they are where they are now, and just being a good person is not good enough. And I think a lot of time we Christians do that too. I've done it myself. It's like I go and I do something, and I make that excuse. Like I try to justify the thing I did, or the thought I had, or something. Or, maybe even just if I felt a little hatred towards somebody because they did something I highly disagreed with. And I'm like, well, God, I hate them, but my heart, I'm a good person. And we all know that hatred's a bad thing. Or even throwing a fit. Getting mad and going on a rage, in the Bible, it says to not do that's not a good thing to do. And I've done it. I've had my moments. We've all had our moments where we just get very angry and we lash out and we show how angry we are. And then it's like we go into prayer. It's like, well, God, you know me. I'm a good person. My heart. So for some reason, it's like we think that just clears it up. It's okay. It's like we don't even ask for forgiveness or tell God we're going to change. We accept that we are an angry person and that we're probably going to do it again. So we just ask God to please look over that when we do it, because, we have a good heart. We know in our heart that we love the Lord and we try our best, and that we are a good person. And we ask God, we don't even ask for forgiveness almost. We just say, please look over it because you know my heart. And that's not going to do the job, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That's not going to sanctify you. That's not going to cleanse you. It's not enough just to be a good person in your heart. That has to show outwardly. This is exactly where God's, we're all the talk about bearing good fruit. The fruit's on the outside of the tree. Or even, I think of the fig tree that Jesus came across. And he cursed it because it wasn't producing any good figs. And that's something you see. And so if it's not, if you're a good person and it's not being seen, and you're doing things that are constantly getting you in trouble, or you're doing things that are just, against God's ways and what the Bible teaches us how to be, being good in your heart. One way I think about this is like if you want to give to charity, or you want to help out in a charity in some way, and man, you have it in your heart, and you have it in your heart to be determined to do so, and you've talked about doing it. You've even, you've looked into other ones to do, but you never do it. But you have it in your heart that you want to, and you have it in your heart that you're going to, and you have it in your heart that it's important to, but never doing anything about it doesn't help that charity out. I'm sure the charity would be very nice if you went to them and said, oh, I wanted to give money, or I want to give my time, but I just have none to spare. They'd probably say that's very nice of you, but that they are thinking to themselves like, well, that's really no help. Part of charity is not only having the heart to do it, but also taking the action to do it. And that's just how God is too, being a good person at heart, but not showing that, not living a life in that way. That's not enough for God. And, that's what he was trying to give the Israelite people the chance, and Hezekiah the chance, and all through history, he's giving people the chance. From the beginning of time, he's giving us the chance to prove ourselves. He's being fair in that sense. And it's not enough to be a good person. I mean, in Eve's heart, she was a good person. In Adam's heart, he was a good person. They were good people, and they were, as far as we know in the Bible, they were good people until the day they died. But they did something wrong, and they were cast out of the garden for it. And being a good person, and no doubt did they love God, because they brought their children up to love God. They clearly loved God when they left the garden, and that wasn't enough. They did the thing they weren't supposed to, and just being a good person and loving God, and it was not enough. And it's not going to ever be enough just to have it in your heart. You have to show it. You have to live it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Reliable Bible. Visit our website, reliablebible.com. You can fill out our contact form there. Reach out to the show for any show suggestions, questions, corrections, what have you. And also, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, please do so. If you're on YouTube, please give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to how you feel about this episode, and even leave a comment. Let me know how you feel. If you have not yet on the podcast platform, give the show a rating and leave an overall comment how you feel about the show in general. That'd be highly appreciated. That just helps people find this show who are looking for content like this. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone who helps support this show. If you'd like to help, patreon.com/Reliable Bible. So as I said in the beginning, I'm quarantined right now. My family are doing our best to stay in. So the background might change. Microphone might change. Who knows? This was just a quick setup that I wanted to do. Maybe I'll like it well enough. We'll see. And I'll just keep doing it this way until I can have my podcasting table back. But then also, I have to admit, I've been a little distracted on, not distracted on this virus that's going around, but distracted on how I was going to carry on the show as far as, what equipment I was going to use, where I was going to do it, and then also the shows. I have talked to some people about being guests on the show, and now that's clearly not going to be able to happen. And I know Matt was here with us last week, right after all the quarantine happened, but actually that episode was recorded 3 weeks prior to releasing it. So he was here before any quarantines or any bans were put on place, or even before social distancing. Even before social distancing was even a term, he was here and he recorded that. And when I have a guest, I usually wait a couple of weeks to post that, just because it helps. It actually, if I do that, it gives me a longer break to be able to take a week and to think of new shows and what have you. So I was prepared to do those. I have topics that I felt were good to be with someone to discuss it. Today was one of them. And so now I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I want to go ahead and do those episodes without someone, because I just feel like they're really good episodes to discuss with somebody. What I may do, and I hope everyone would be okay with this, but I may go ahead and do those episodes myself. And then once this quarantine is over, revisit those episodes with a guest. It's something I may do. Because fortunately, I have been very busy at work. Even though we have come home, we've been working a lot of overtime. We are very busy, and that's a blessing, and I'm very happy about that. Even in these times, we find ourselves that there's a lot of work to do, and it's taking a lot of overtime. It's working through the weekends and what have you, and I'm very blessed. I'm very excited about that, very happy about that during this time. And so it's not giving me a lot of time to prepare and find new topics to do without somebody. So I may be doing that. I may be, like I said, going ahead and doing those shows I prepare to do so with somebody else, and then revisiting those later on after this is all over. So please be praying for the show. I'm praying for you. Be safe, be careful, and I would advise stay at home as much as you can during this time. So God bless you. Thank you all for listening again, and see you next time.